Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Morley. And today we're going to be talking about how we can justify the pain that we're moving through, and we can use those justifications, or our mind can, to avoid us from actually going in and feeling the pain. And what this does is it blocks us from actually going deeper. And that is how the programs work. They block us from going deeper into ourselves. They do this purposefully, of course, to keep us safe and out of feeling the depths of what's in there. And this came up recently. This came up recently with Ellie and I, where I have a tendency to constantly want to share every single part of my healing journey with Ellie. And this aspect of me shows up. It stems from a lot of emotional neglect as a child. There just wasn't a lot of space for me to share. And so whenever I have somebody that is willing to listen, I just want to share. And obviously that's extremely taxing for whoever's listening. And that is Ellie, who gets to bear the brunt of this wounded aspect of me. And sometimes when I'm sharing, I feel that she just doesn't have space for me to share. She doesn't have time for me. And, there's a very wounded part of me that takes that very personally. And obviously it's not personal. Ellie's got her own things in life to move through. And, she doesn't need to constantly be there for me to listen to everything I'm moving through. And so when I come to sharing and then feeling, there's like, she doesn't care, what my programs want to do is they want to not allow me to feel that pain. I want to go deeper and be like, okay, I know this is related to my childhood wounding. I know this is related to my mother and father. And then there's a disconnect here where my programs will say, yeah, but she doesn't care. So why would I bother like trying to go deeper, or why would I even bother feeling this? Like, she doesn't care. And when we allow that like justification to happen, we keep ourselves trapped, because what it does is it stops us actually going in and opening to it. Now, what we tend to do when we're doing this work is want to get immediately straight down to the inner childhood wound. We want to get down to the deepest aspect of us. But in this moment, what I actually had to do was just open to the fact that in this moment, Ellie doesn't care. And obviously that's okay, right? I know that as my adult self, but the wounded aspect of me that's showing up right now that really wants Ellie to show up in presence, like it to that aspect, to that part of me, it hurts because she's not being present with me. And this is something that is reoccurring in our relationship all the time. I'm constantly getting triggered when Ellie isn't fully present. And this is relating back to, obviously, my childhood, but it gets projected onto our relationship now. And what's actually lacking in that moment is me learning to be present with myself. Is that there's stuff coming up that I just want to share so I can get it off my chest and process. And what I really need to do in that moment is go, I can see that, this aspect of me just wants to share, just wants to be heard, just wants to be seen. And I'm looking for that space and that presence outside of myself. And that doesn't mean, obviously, when we're in a relationship, we want our partners. Of course, that's beautiful. It's a very divine way to show up if we are able to be the space and the presence for a partner to share what it is they're moving through. But what happens when they don't? And in this case, it's I go into, oh, she doesn't care. Now, the truth is, Ellie's got her own stuff going on in life. But when I tell that to my inner child, that's not good enough for him. And so what I need to do in that moment is just open my heart to the fact that she doesn't care. And when I'm able to do that and really realize, oh, she doesn't care, and it's not to do with me, that when I surrender into the fact that she doesn't care, that's what organically arrives me out the way of truth, of seeing she doesn't. It's got nothing to do with me. She doesn't care. And that's okay. Why? Because I've got me and I care. And in that, it changes the energy and opens the space up for me to have the realization that, oh, yeah, this is actually related to my parents. This is related to either my mom or dad, and I'm pretty sure in this case, both. There wasn't space for me to just share what it is that I'm moving through and actually be received. And so this is a constant pattern that I show up into. And every time that Ellie is moving through something, which is a natural part of life, then I get this reflected back to me. And then I'm like, oh, this is a perfect time to go in and heal that. Sometimes it takes, an hour or two. But I just have to be okay within myself and move through that process inside.
All right, so let's go a little deeper in real time right now, because as you were talking about all of that, I started connecting some dots. And so this is all true. When Danny loves to share, and I know a part of the compassion for that is that, he just never had anyone to really confide in growing up, and I know, and I see that, and it's never, when he shares with me, it's just this, of course, as his partner, like, of course you want to share, and of course you want to take on the journey, and he and I, we live a very abnormal life and have an abnormal relationship because of the paths that we're on. We're not these like closed, unconscious, partners who don't ever get deep within themselves. And so, that triggered me when I see that how much he wants to share and how much I turn off from that. And the connecting the dots of it is that I've talked about this a lot. I was very meshed with my mother. My mother never had friends, and so I was her soundboard constantly. And this woman I was her venting. I was her place where she had all her secrets. I was hearing the same thing over and over again every single day of my life, over and over and over and over again. Like the same things that I was listening to at 6, I was still listening to at 30 years old, kind of thing. And so this is really triggering for me, because when Danny shows up in that energy, just when he's sharing, it's actually triggering for what it's triggering is all of that unprocessed like resentment and anger that I started building towards my mother, because I could be there and I could listen to all of what she's saying, but she never listened to me. It was this like, and it was in her inability to be present with her pain. She needed me to always listen, to carry it, to be on her side. I remember this moment. I finally, when I was in my mid 20s, I flipped out, which was like very not like me. But my mom would vent so much about certain people that I started to hate these people. I started to turn on these people that never did anything to me. And one day I finally looked at her and I said, "Stop telling me all of this stuff. Like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to hear anymore." And then her response to me was that I was a bad daughter, was that I wasn't what she needed me to be. And that's my fault. And she would weaponize that and she would use it against me. And when she'd be mad, she's like, "Well, you don't even listen to me. You don't even care about me." So I think when that energy comes up with you, that's what it's triggering, because there's so much unprocessed stuff from constantly being my mom's soundboard and never having the power to create boundaries. And I think that's something that's healthy too, that I'm learning with Danny, and I have to learn for myself, is like, because I have, I'm very closed, like my inner child is really closed. I don't have the ability to be able to speak up. So if, let's say, just for an example, the thing that he and I had a conversation about yesterday, finally, and I broke down and I cried, and he's like, "And you were so amazing, Danny. Like, you held my hand and you're like, share." And like, I always forget that it's okay to share with you, or it's okay to express myself, or it's okay that if I do say something, you're not going to turn around and like hurt me in some way. Like, that's something that I'm so used to because of my upbringing, that I have a hard time expressing myself. And so yesterday, everything was pouring out of me. And, I said to you, I was like, because the thing that was really like tipped me over the edge was Danny's moving through a lot of stuff with his physical body, with specifically just food and coffee in general. And also I am, but I keep everything internalized. So that's another aspect, is when you talk about your physical body and food, it's really triggering to me because it's something that I don't express and I'm moving through. But the other layer about it is like, because Danny, we obviously live together and all this stuff, hearing about it over and over and over and over again, instead of me being like, hey, I totally honor what you're moving through, but like, you've talked about this 7 times today already. Like, I'm just going to create a boundary of like, I've heard it and I know it, and I just need like space for me to not, you know what I'm saying, Danny? I'm sure you'll put this into better words, but create a boundary of being like, I've heard it and I honor it and I've listened to it. And now, like, I'm okay with not hearing this. I don't say any of that stuff. And so I just let it build up, build up, build up, build up, build up, build up, until one day I'm flipping out and I'm going nuts. And he's looking at me like, where is this all coming from? And so that's also just a direct um, showing of how I couldn't do that as a child. Like, I wasn't allowed to be like, Mom, I'm creating a boundary and I don't want to hear that anymore. And when I did create a boundary, I was met with rage, and I was met with all this betrayal, as if I betrayed her, because 24 years of hearing all this shit wasn't enough, you know? And so that was another thing, is that boundaries are bad. Boundaries are unloving. Boundaries are, like the worst thing you could ever do, right? Which is what we're all taught when someone that you're creating a boundary with is so emotionally fragile. And so there's always layers to these things. And so that's the connection that I was making. And I think a lot of times when you share so much about me, what comes up from my inner child is like, all I do is listen to you, but what about me? There's that too. And so there's the resentment again that builds up towards Danny, which in reality, it's got nothing to do with Danny. It's everything that's unprocessed with my mother. Bam.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is how we project our stuff onto our partner.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same aspect of like what Ellie was missing is presence. Like, she didn't have the presence from her parents growing up. And so, I mean, what the analogy I could just see like yesterday, it's like taking a bottle of Coca-Cola or champagne, however you want it, just shaking it up. She's just ready to blow inside, because nobody ever taught her how to just release a little bit of that gas slowly and just open up a little bit. So it just all builds up, and then it explodes out. And then obviously that, it's, you're in suffering, and then in our relationship, I'm showing up overbearing, overloading, and then you're showing up the complete opposite, just taking it all and holding everything in. And neither one of those creates harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one of those is, creating something that, is in balance, that creates balance, that allows a relationship to thrive. And neither one is wrong, right? I'm not saying either one of these is, wrong or bad, but it doesn't create, a relationship where you can thrive. And this is an example of where we both lack presence. And, just open it up. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a difference here between, I remember hearing one person saying, like, oh, you're like talking about how your heart can be too open. I remember immediately heard that. I was like, that doesn't quite hit for me. And I asked Rachel about it, and she confirmed what it was that I felt. And it's like, your heart can't be too open. That doesn't exist. That's what working towards being a heart-centered being. But what people misunderstand here is where, if it was to say I'm being too open, I'm not being open from my heart, right? I'm oversharing from my programs. If I was open in my heart, right, I would be alchemizing all of the stuff that's been there, that I just want somebody to see me and understand me, and I need I need space basically to share what it is I'm moving through. And an open heart would be able to be that space for itself, whereas a closed heart wouldn't. And so it's not about just being so open and open from the space of just constantly pouring all of your shit out, which is what I do. It's about being open from your heart. And that requires us all individually to go on that journey within and be that presence for ourselves. And when we're able to do that, then that's what we offer other people. And that's what allows our relationship to thrive.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's, Danny and I always talk about this because every relationship I had before Danny, I thought I was like super open. And then, beknownst to me, it wasn't until we started dating where I realized I kept like projecting onto him that he was closed. And it was that I was closed and I couldn't see it. I have a very difficult time sharing. And it's ironic because I think that anybody who would know me not in person would be like, all Ellie does is share. Because on social media, I share so much about everything. And I share so much with social media because it's not an actual person. Like I'm just talking to my phone. So it just feels like I'm with myself. And I have a very hard time expressing myself. I have a very hard time sharing what I'm feeling. I have a very hard time verbalizing anything. And so, of course, I would date a partner who shows that to me. And it's been really, really difficult for me to allow that to really open because all I've ever done is close, and shut it up and suck it up, and nobody cares. And so, it's going to take me time. Obviously, I'm not 5 years old doing this work. I'm, well into almost 40, and so that's been really hard for me to see in myself. Of you don't see what your trauma has done to you until you really start going on this path, and then you realize like, holy shit, like I have such a difficult time. And one of my really good friends the other day, she and I were talking, she's like, all you do is ask me about myself, and then when I ask you about what you're moving through, she's like, you keep it like at 3 sentences. And it's just this program that I have of this inner child wound of like, nobody cares what you're moving through, Ellie. Like, nobody cares. And like,
Mm.
you don't matter. And so just speed it up, sis. And that's what I do constantly. And it's really sad. It's really, really sad. And then it brings me always to how much I actually harbor all of this like hatred towards my parents, and something that I've never felt before. And so, yeah, it's a process. I'm moving through it, but it's going to take me time. Yeah.
Yeah, and the beauty of this is that is the exact wound that I have. And that is the exact thing that gets brought up is nobody cares. So I'm just finally have somebody who cares, my partner. And so I'm like, share, 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 share. Because I went through such like a scarcity of that like presence and connection growing up. And like, oh my God, I have finally what I want, somebody who's going to listen to me. And then it goes all in. And underneath that, the reason why I'm doing that is the exact same thing of, yeah, nobody cares. And obviously that's what I started this share with was then I had to process and just sit with the fact that, yeah, she doesn't care right now. And it's not because she doesn't care about you, right? When we're deeply in our wounding, it feels like what I was experiencing was like Ellie doesn't care about me, and in that moment, it's true. She didn't because she had her own shit going on, but my inner child doesn't understand that, and so that's where I just have to surrender into yeah, nobody does care, and that's okay. Do you know why? Because I've got you. And this is a beautiful example of how we are talking about the exact same vibrational frequency that nobody cares. It is literally the exact same mental program running for both Ellie and I, yet it creates vastly different behavioral programs in both of us. For me, it turns into an oversharing, a openness, but not in the sense of open heart, just pouring out of all of my shit, right? Versus Ellie shutting down, closing off, bottling everything up, harboring her feelings. Which obviously, when we do that, when we harbor all those feelings, it builds up to the resentment that's in there. And so, two identical inner childhood wounds, not in the form of the way that they were created, but in terms of like what's playing in there that nobody cares, but creates a vastly different behavioral program, which to me, who loves this work, like I find that absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. And, and this is like the majority of the world, right? It's like when we have so much wounding, it makes me sad to think like, to know that Danny feels like I don't care, because in that moment I am showing up like that, right? But that's all wounding. And in reality, like the person I care about the most is Danny in this entire world, right? And so when you have so much wounding, you don't ever show up as the real you. You don't ever show up in how you actually feel about someone or all of these things. And that's why it's so important, to be doing this work, because who I want to be and how I want to show up in this relationship is vastly different as how I am showing up, because there is so much wounding there. So it is exciting to know that one day I won't be showing up like this, right? And it will be a very different relationship when it is like that. But the truth of the matter is that there is so much wounding, and I am showing up in these ways, and I have to process a lot of like self shame and guilt that I get triggered into when we do have these conversations, because the real me is like, no, I love you and I care about you and oh my God, blah, blah. But the wounded me shows up really, really different. And think about how many couples and, in the world show up from wounding and not from a place of divinity.
Yeah, and great transition to where we can take this next, because from a relationship that operates in separation consciousness, I need you to be everything that I'm not, right? And you need me to be everything that I'm not. I need you to be present for me and my pain, right? And that's how we create balance. That's like the yin and the yang. In oneness consciousness, I become that for myself. And I truly do the work to elevate, to elevate, to elevate, to become healed and whole as I'm in the container, potentially, of a relationship. Maybe I'm single, whatever, doesn't matter. I do the work to heal that and become that myself, so I never need my partner to be that ever again. If you hear anybody saying something like, "Oh, well, you need to state your needs to your partner and what you need them to be," you already know that they're coming from a lower level of consciousness, because they're not willing to become what they need for themselves. And while we stay in a place where I need you to be present for me and my pain, I'm disempowering myself and I'm trapping myself at a much lower level. And all that means is we're not truly finding the freedom within ourselves in the container of a relationship. So the way in which we're going to be connecting is not from the way of connection. It's not coming from an enlightened place. It's coming from a place of neediness. It's coming from a place of powerlessness. I need you to be a certain way to fit my wounds so that I'm okay. Bullshit. You can do that if you want, but that's not what we're creating here. That's not elevating to the ways of oneness and being an enlightened being of oneness consciousness. That's still looking for something outside of ourselves. And so what Ellie and I are working on creating is, yes, we want to show up as these beautiful ways of being for our like each other. I recognize like, oh man, I don't want to be oversharing constantly, and I want to be present for you as you move through your pain too. Like, oh my God. And there's a lot of shame which I've had to, I don't carry it anymore as much, had to work through when I realized that I'm oversharing and I'm running that program and I'm overloading you. I've had to move through all those layers, and now feel like I'm not in that place anymore. When I do run the program, it's, oh, I'm doing it again. Oh, it's okay, Danny. You're just doing that thing again. Let me find it from within myself. Let me surrender into the fact that in this moment she doesn't care, and that's okay. And I can love myself through that process. And when I do, on the other side of that, I can now connect from a very different energy. And that meant when Ellie shared with me her pain of, I just feel like you don't care because you're always sharing. Instead of me being triggered into defensiveness or other programs, I can just be present in my heart. And that's what allows us to connect on a deeper level, from a level of like more enlightened connection and presence.
I mean, beautifully said. The old world is your partner should meet your needs. I have a close friend who's always like, yeah, my partner should be meeting these very specific needs. It's my need. It's my needs. It's my needs. And it's like, feel the energy of that. It's like, why do you need another person to meet your own needs? Like, it's so disempowering and it's so powerless. And the new earth is you meet your own needs. And you don't bring that into a partnership, and you don't expect that from your partner, because none of that is actual true connection or true love or anything like that. And the name of this entire game is seeking it within yourself and becoming it within yourself, right? Which I understand as a process because all we've grown up and been birthed in is in separation consciousness, right? You know, Rachel's famous quote of like, we have mastered separation. We were masters of it. And so, yeah, every time I see or I hear someone going, oh, my partner's not meeting my needs, it's like, oh, the energy of that is so icky and it's low. And, you know, when you were speaking about that, it's like how powerful it is to be in a partnership and not need anything from the other person. Like that is true freedom, like
Yeah.
true freedom. And then what can you create between the two of you? And that's another thing that's I think is really exciting. And I look forward to that so much in our relationship to people on the path. Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, all the
Yeah.
time. I
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel it.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
That's the whole point of this work, of course.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really exciting. And, you know, it's so funny because one day, Danny and I were with Rachel and, you know, her husband, and we are basically sharing like, you know, our relationship is like, and Danny does this more fluidly than I do. I'm always like a few steps behind, but you know, what it means to get triggered by each other and then to go into it. And like, honestly, like, as in the beginning, it was like, you trigger me, this is your fault. I've gotten so much better with it where it's like, all right, that's really triggering and I'm moving through it faster than I used to. But we were sharing that with Rachel and her husband of like, you know, to be in a relationship where we can see that we're projecting and like stuff's coming up within ourselves and not to blame our partners, but to go into it. And she starts laughing and she was like, this is what I told, you know, she was pointing to her husband. Like, remember I told you this years and years and years ago that this is going to be what the new earth is going to be like. This is what relationships are going to be like, or that there's no more projection. There's only, wow, you just triggered a lot of stuff in me. Let me go take care of it. Let me go love myself. And then let me come back and let me share with you what I moved through. And I was like, cool, we are living that. We're like the first prototypes of that.
And that doesn't mean not holding each other accountable.
Yes.
Right? For the harm that we create when we do run our programs. Right? That it's not void of that. The first way of oneness is the way of responsibility, right? And so that doesn't mean that we're coming from this place of, oh, well, everything that I experience is just within myself.
Right.
No, if somebody does something unloving to you, like you've still got to process that and then go through the motions of, oh, is it bringing up anything, right? And then we have to, you know, come back together and be like, okay, let's break this down. What's really going on? Because there are times when, you know, somebody isn't running a program, right? And it's just like, no, that was just, we just have to process what just happened there.
Yes, that too. Because that could be, I've seen that in the spiritual matrix.
Right. That's what I'm alluding to.
Yeah. Because a lot of like comedians who make fun of like spirituality, they'll do that. They'll talk about like, oh, yeah. And that's the pendulum swinging to the extremes.
It showed up. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday where it showed up where this person was exploring the polyamorous relationship thing. And in doing that, basically cheating, if you class it that, on their husband. And in doing that, basically putting all of the emphasis on everything that you're feeling, all the anxiety when I'm off having basically an affair with this person. Everything is your own wounding and you've just got to heal all of that. And that's obviously, there's an element in there that potentially could be true. Like, oh, as this person is going out and doing this thing, oh, it's bringing up my stuff and I do have to go in and work on that. But when you're in a really sacred relationship, we have to take accountability for what it is that we're actually doing. And if we are actually causing harm to our partner, like that needs to be recognized. And it's not all, this is oneness consciousness, it's not all just my inner world. We're building a relationship together. And that's what it means to be in oneness with somebody, is to understand, yeah, I'm bringing all of my baggage in and I've got to take responsibility and accountability for that. And if I do something in this partnership, I can't just be like, well, you're triggered and you're running a program and good luck with that. What part am I playing in creating harm with my partner, because that needs to be looked at. That's part of it. And for this example we're using between Ellie and I'm creating a lack of oneness when I'm showing up constantly needing her to be present. And that's, granted, it's maybe not harmful, but it lacks divinity. And that's my responsibility to go into. I can't just sit here from a superior position and say, well, if that triggers you, like, you need to go into it.
Yeah.
I need to take accountability for the way that I'm showing up. And that's how we connect. And when we do that, that opens the door to like a way different dynamic of true radical empowerment.
Yes. And you are so beautiful when you do that, you know, because I know that there are sometimes where like a projection will slip in, and I can feel when like I'm not taking accountability for myself and I'm just putting it on you. And it's so beautiful to witness you take accountability for things. It teaches me so much of where I don't do that, where if I'm causing harm or I'm saying something unloving and all these things. And so that's such a beautiful, the way that you worded it was perfect. And so let that be, you know, something for everybody to reflect on, whether you're in a relationship or not. It could be friendships, it could be with your parents, it could be any kind of relation. You know, take accountability, but also go into your stuff.
Go into your stuff. Yeah. And I mean, I do it too. And a lot of the time I'm doing it and I'm realizing I'm projecting and I'm not even saying anything. Or if I am, I'm kind of like holding it in. And then I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm projecting onto her right now. You know, that's my shit to go into. Like, I can't just show up that way and let her be like triggered by it or whatever.
Yeah.
And just avoid all responsibility and just blame. So if you are in a relationship and you want to learn this work and you're interested in learning a little deeper about what we're talking about, just sign up for a free consultation below and jump on a quick call with us. We can break down the work that we offer and what it is that we do and how we can help you, whether you're in a partnership or not, or maybe you're just looking for somebody to do this work with, or just somebody to share your life with, or maybe you're just roaming single and you're good with that too. Like, this is oneness. All is welcome here. So if you're interested in doing the work, follow the link below and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much, everyone.